The woman threw the silver needle in her hand to her disciple, but the disciple felt that the needle was too heavy and couldn't hold it steady. The next second, the needle fell onto the stone table. The stone table instantly cracked. The silver needle was also deeply embedded into the ground. But when the disciple tried to pull the needle out of the ground, he found that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't pull it out. Shocked, he asked his teacher in front of him, "Why is the silver needle so heavy?" The teacher calmly told the disciple, "It's just 1,000 jinn silver needle, not heavy at all." Then she pulled out another silver needle and said the one in her hand weighed 10,000 jinn. Hearing this, the disciple stood there in shock. He couldn't have imagined that the teacher everyone called a useless person actually had such astonishing strength. From that day on, the disciple had to mend clothes every day using the 1,000 jinn silver needle. The other disciples laughed at him when they saw this. They even said that ever since he became the woman's disciple, he had become more and more like a woman. Even now, he was imitating her by mending clothes. But they had no idea that the silver needle in his hand actually weighed 1,000 jinn. One day, the woman looked at her disciple still mending clothes and still felt it wasn't enough. To make her disciple a qualified mage, she prepared a meteoric iron vest weighing 5,000 jinn for him. But when he reached out to take it, he was suddenly dragged to the ground by the weight of the vest. He looked at the woman in shock, but she simply smiled and poured herself a cup of tea. Looking at his casual teacher, the man tried to lift the vest with all his might, but even using all his strength, he could barely hold the vest against his chest. He asked the woman in confusion, "Why is this vest even heavier than the silver needle?" The woman calmly told him, "This vest is made of meteoric iron. It only weighs 5,000 jinn." Hearing that, the man looked at the vest in his hands in shock, not knowing what to say. Then the woman told him that starting today, he must wear the vest no matter what he was doing, and he could only take it off with her permission. Seeing how serious she was, he could only agree. But what he didn't know was that at this moment, the woman was also shocked by his performance. She couldn't help but question the man's physique. Could this be the legendary undying body? Thinking that, the woman ignored the disciple's questions and turned to leave. He had no choice but to sit down again and continue mending clothes. The woman thought about how in half a month it would be time for the monthly assessment at the Magic Academy. To help her disciple pass the assessment, she decided to teach him a more powerful spell. With just a gentle wave of her hand, the huge rock in front of her instantly shattered into countless small stones. The man looked at the broken stones in front of him in shock, unable to believe what he was seeing. Half a month passed quickly. The Magic Academy's assessment finally began. Each assessment included 3 different parts, and every student in the academy had to participate. The man looked at the junior who was provoking him. He just smiled faintly and talked back, thinking it wasn't certain yet who would win or lose. Meanwhile, the teacher was also mocked by the other teachers. They believed she had given up on her student's assessment. That's why she was just teaching him how to mend clothes every day. But they didn't know that the silver needle used to mend clothes actually weighed 1,000 jinn. Soon, the headmaster announced the start of the assessment. The first test was a strength competition. Each student had to punch the magic statue. The stronger the punch, the higher the statue would spray a column of water. Soon, a student began the test, but his water column only reached 4 meters. The vice principal declared it a failure. One student after another went up to test. Soon, it was the provoking junior's turn. He punched the statue with all his might. The statue quickly shot up a water column 12 meters high. The vice principal, pleased, announced that the junior had passed. The other students were stunned by the junior's performance. They hadn't expected him to be that strong, reaching a height of 12 meters. Next, it was the disciple's turn. He looked nervously at the heavy vest on his body, worried it would affect his performance. He asked his teacher if he could take off the vest, but the teacher firmly refused. Helplessly, the man went forward to take the test. He threw a punch with all his strength, but because of the weight on his body, he almost stumbled from the inertia, and the punch only produced a 1-meter-high water column. The vice principal was very disappointed and announced that the man had failed. The students below began to mock him, thinking he was a useless loser, that no matter how hard he studied, he'd never succeed. But what they didn't know was that the vest he wore far outweighed the strength they used for their punches. Soon, it was time for the second test. The second part was a test of balance. Each student had to use magic to fly onto a rope above and walk across to the other side. The shorter the time, the better the score. Falling off meant failure. The students went up one by one. When it was the junior's turn, he easily flew up to the rope and quickly ran across the rope. The vice principal watched him with satisfaction. Meanwhile, the man was still begging his teacher to let him take off the vest, but was rejected again. He had no choice but to fly up to the rope with the vest on, but the vest's weight made it hard to keep his balance. Just then, the junior's teacher threw a stone in the man's direction, and it hit him right on the body.